Page number 163 continued. Reasons for the popularity. The periodical essay found a spectacular response in the 18th century on account of various reasons. Fundamentally, this new genre was in perfect harmony with the spirit of the age. Its sensitivity combined the tastes of the deliberate classes of readers with the result that it appealed to all, though particularly to the resurgent middle classes. In the 18th century, there was a phenomenal spurt in the literacy which expanded widely the circle of readers. They welcomed the periodical essay as it was light literature. The brevity of the periodical essay, its common sense approach, and its tendency to dilute morality and philosophy for popular consumption paid rich dividends. To a great extent, the periodical essayist assumed the office of the clergyman and taught the masses the lesson of elegance and refinement, though not of morality of the psalm-singing kind. Psalm, P-S-A-L-M, psalm-singing kind. The periodical paper was particularly welcome as it was not a dry, highbrow or hoity-toity affair like the professional sermon, in spite of being highly instructive in nature. In most cases, the periodical essayist did not speak from the clouds, but communicated with the reader with an almost buttonholing familiarity. The avoidance of politics, though not by all of the periodical essayists, yet by a good many number of them, also contributed towards their popularity. Again, the periodical essayists made it a point to cater to the female taste and give due consideration to the female point of view. That won for them many female readers too. All these factors were responsible for the universal acceptance of the periodical essay in 18th century England. End of page 163. Now page 164. The most important gifts of the 18th century to English literature are the periodical essay and the novel, neither of which had any classical precedent. Both of them were prose forms and commonly suited to the genius of the 18th century, English men and women. The periodical essayist and the novelist were both exponents of the same sensibility and culture, and worked on the same intellectual, sentimental, and realistic plane, with the oft avowed aim of instructing the readers and making them lead a more purposeful and virtuous life. Of these two new literary genres, the periodical essay was a peculiar product of the environment prevailing at that time. It was born with the 18th century and died with it after enjoying a career of phenomenal popularity. The novel, on the other hand, survived valiantly the turn of the century and has since then been not only managing to live, but has been growing from strength to strength and adding to its popularity. Even today, in the 21st century, when the current of poetry has unhappily run into the arid vistas of cold intellectualism and clever phrase-mongering, and the real drama has become as defunct as the dodo, The novel, which originated in the 18th century, is holding up its head as a dominant literary genre. It was immediately after 1740 that the English novel suddenly arose from the lower forms and came to embody, as no other literary form did, the spirit of the age. The glorious work of Richardson and Fielding was followed by that of the two other major novelists of the 18th century, namely Smollett, 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 and Sterne, Sterne, Sterne. Soon the whole English literary air was thick with the staggering vast number of novels produced by a host of writers. Let us consider the important reasons for the rise of the novel in the 18th century, as also by implication for its spectacular popularity. Reasons for the rise and popularity. Various reasons can be adduced for the rise and popularity of the novel in the 18th century. The most important of them is that the new literary forms suited the genius and the temper of the times. The 18th century is known in English social history for the rise of the middle classes, consequent upon an unprecedented increase in the volume of trade and commerce. Many people emerged from the limbo of society to occupy a respectable status as wealthy burgesses. Burgesses. The novel, with its realism, its democratic spirit, and its concern with the everyday psychological problems of the common people, especially appealed to these nouveau riche and provided them with respectable reading material. The novel thus appears to have been especially designed both to voice the aspirations of the middle and low classes and to meet their taste. Moreover, it gave the writer some scope for which Kazemian, Kazemian calls morality and sentiment, the two elements which make literature popular. The decline of drama in the 18th century was also part responsible for the rise and ascendancy of the novel. After the Licensing Act of 1737, the drama lay moribund. The poetry of the age too, for the brilliant example of Pope's work, was in a stage of decadence. It was then natural that from the ashes of the drama and to some extent of poetry should rise the phoenix-like shape of a new literary genre. This new genre was, of course, the novel. Oliver Goldsmith, 1728 to 1774. Goldsmith was essentially a conservative in literary theory, as Dr. Johnson, of whose club he was an eminent member. Both of his important poems, The Traveller, 1764, and The Deserted Village, 1770, are in heroic couplets. The first poem is didactic, after Johnson's usual practice, and is concerned with the description and criticism of the places and the people in Europe which Goldsmith had visited as a tramp. The second poem is rich in natural description and is vibrant with peculiar note of scientists and melancholy, which foreshadows 19th century romantics. As in the first poem, Goldsmith exhibits the tenderness of his feelings for poor villagers. William Cooper, 1731 to 1800. He, says Crompton Rickett, is a blend of the old and the new, with much of the form of the old and something of the spirit of the new. In his satires, he imitated the manner of Pope, but his greatest poem, The Task, is all his own. It is written in blank verse and contains the famous line, "God made the country and man made the town," which indicates his love for nature and simplicity. However, the classical element in him is more predominant than the romantic. Compton Rickett maintains, we shall find in his work neither the passion nor the strangeness of the romantic school. End of page 164. Now page 165. Much in his nature disposed to shape him as a poet of classicism, and with his occasional reserves, he is far more of a classical classical poet than a romantic. Yet throughout Cowper's work, we feel from the time to time a note of something that is currently not the note of Pope or Dryden. Pope or Dryden, something deeper in feeling, and that meets us even in Thomson, Collins, or Gray. There is a tenderness in poems like My Mother's Picture and that not even Goldsmith in his verse can quite equal, while his fresh and intimate nature pictures point to a stage in the development of the poetic naturalism none considerable than we find in Thomson and his immediate successors. George Crabbe, 1754 to 1832. He mostly continued the neoclassic tradition and was derisively dubbed as a pope in worsted stockings. In his poetry, which is mostly descriptive of the miseries of poor villagers, he was an uncompromising, unromantic realist. He asserted, "I paint the court as truth will paint it, and as bards will not." He showed much concern for villagers, but he left for Wordsworth to glorify their simplicity and even penury. Crabbe's excessive boldness as a realist alienates him from the polish of the neoclassic school. However, he tenaciously adhered to the heroic couplet even when he was a contemporary of Blake and the Romantic poets. Robert Burns, 1759 to 1795. He was a Scottish peasant who took to poetry and became the truly national poet of Scotland. His work, poems chiefly in the Scottish dialect, 1786, skyrocketed him to fame. All these poems are imbued with the spirit of romantic lyricism in its untutored spontaneity, humor, pathos, and sympathy with nature and her lowly creatures, including the sons of the soil. Sometimes, indeed, Burns tries to write in the correct manner of Popian school, but when he becomes unimpressive, but then he becomes unimpressive and insipid. A critic observes, Burns was a real peasant who drove the plough as he hummed his songs, and who knew all the wretchedness and joys and sorrows of the countryman's life. Sincerity and compassion are the chief keys of his verse. Burns can utter a piercing lyric cry as in a fond kiss, and then we sever. Can be gracefully sentimental as in my love is like a red rose. Can be coarsely witty as the jolly beggars, but he is always sincere and passionate, and that is why his words go straight to the heart. Burns was influenced a great deal by the spirit of the French Revolution. His fellow feeling extended even to the lower animals, whom he studied minutely and treated sympathetically. William Blake, 1757 to 1827. Blake was an out-and-out rebel against all the social, political and literary conventions of the 18th century. It is with considerable inaccuracy that he can be included among the transitional poets or the precursors of the Romantic revival, as in many ways he is even more romantic than the Romantic poets. The most undisciplined and the most lonely of all poets, he lived in his own world, peopled by phantoms and spectres, whom he treated as more real than the humdrum realities of the physical world. His glorification of childhood and feeling for nature make him akin to the Romantic poets. He is best known for his 3 thin volumes, Poetical Sketches, 1783, Songs of Innocence, and the Songs of Experience, which contain some of the most orient gems of English lyricism. A critic observes, quote, his passion for freedom was also akin to that which moved Wordsworth, Coleridge and Southey in their earlier years, though in its later form it came nearer to Shelley's revolt against convention. There is indeed an unusual degree of fellowship between these two, the imagery and the symbolism, as well as the underlying spirit of the revolt of Islam. Alistair and Prometheus Unbound find their nearest parallel in Blake's prophetic books. Both had visions of a world regenerated by a gospel of universal brotherhood transcending law. Meaning of the novel. Probably the most significant remark made by the ordinary reader concerning a work of fiction takes the form of a question. Is it a good story? For the reader of today is much like the child and the primitive man in this respect, that he must be attracted and held by the story element of a narrative before he learns to appreciate its style or moral significance. The story element is therefore essential to the novel, but where the story originates is impossible to say. As well might we seek for the origin of the race, for wherever primitive men are found, there we see them gathering eagerly about the storyteller. In the halls of our Saxon ancestors, the scope and the tale bringer were ever the most welcome guests, and in the bark wigwams of American Indians, the man who told the legends of Hiawatha had an audience quite as attentive as that which gathered at the Greek festivals to hear the story of Ulysses' wanderings. End of page 165. Now page 166. To man's instinct or innate love for a story, we are indebted for all our literature, and the novel must in some degree satisfy this instinct or fail of appreciation. The second question which we ask concerning the work of fiction is, how far does the element of imagination enter into it? For upon the element of imagination depends largely our classification of works of fiction into novels, romances, and mere adventure stories. The divisions here are as indefinite as the borderland between childhood and youth, between instinct and reason. But there are certain principles to guide us. We note in the development of any normal child that there comes a time when, for his stories, he desires knights, giants, elves, fairies, witches, magic, and marvelous adventures which have no basis in experience. He tells extraordinary tales about himself which may be only the vague remembrances of a dream or the creations of a dawning imagination, both of which are as real to him as any other part of life. When we say that such a child romances, we give exactly the right name to it, for this sudden interest in extraordinary beings and events marks the development of the human imagination, running riot at first because it is not guided by reason, which is a later development. And to satisfy this new interest, the romance was invented. The romance is originally a work of fiction in which the imagination is given full play without being limited by facts or probabilities. It deals with extraordinary events, with heroes whose powers are exaggerated, and often adds the element of superhuman or supernatural characters. It is impossible to draw the line where romance ends, but this element of excessive imagination and of impossible heroes and incidents is its distinguishing mark in every literature. Where the novel begins it is likewise impossible to say, but again we have a suggestion in the experience of every reader. There comes a time, naturally and inevitably, in the life of every youth when the romance no longer enthralls him. He lives in a world of facts, gets acquainted with men and women, some good, some bad, but all human, and he demands that literature shall express life as he knows it by experience. This is the stage of the awakened intellect. And in our stories, the intellect as well as the imagination must now be satisfied. At the beginning of this stage, we delight in Robinson Crusoe. We read eagerly a multitude of adventure narratives and a few so-called historical novels. But in each case, we must be lured by a story must find heroes and moving accidents by flood and field to appeal to our imagination. And though the hero and the adventure may be exaggerated, they must both be natural and within the bounds of probability. Gradually, the element of adventure or surprising incident grows less and less important as we learn that true life is not adventurous but a plain heroic matter of work and duty and the daily choice between good and evil. Life is the most real thing in the world now, not the life of kings or heroes or superhuman creatures, but this individual life with its struggles and temptation and triumphs or failure, like our own, and any work that faithfully represents life becomes interesting. So we drop the adventure story and turn to the novel. For the novel, it is a work of fiction in which the imagination and the intellect combine to express life in the form of a story, and the imagination is always directed and controlled by the intellect. It is interested chiefly not in romance or adventure, but in men and women as they are. It aims to show the motives and influences which govern human life and the effects of personal choice upon character and destiny. Such is the true novel, and as such it opens a wider and more interesting field than any other type of literature. Precursors of the novel. Before the novel could reach its modern age of a more or less sincere attempt to express human life and character, it has to pass through several centuries of almost imperceptible development. Among the early precursors of the age of the novel, we must place a collection of tales known as the Greek romances, dating from the 2nd to the 6th centuries. These are imaginative and delightful stories of ideal love and marvelous adventure, which profoundly affected romance writing for the next 10,000 years. A second group of predecessors is found in the Indian and Spanish pastoral romances, which were inspired by the eclogues of Virgil. These are extremely popular in the 14th and 15th centuries, and their influence is seen later in Sidney's Arcadia, which is the best of this type in English. End of page 166. Now page 167. The third and most influential group of predecessors of the novel is made up of the romances of chivalry, such as are found in Malory's Morte Arthur. It is noticeable in reading these beautiful old romances in different languages that each nation changes them somewhat so as to make them more expressive of natural traits and ideals. In a word, the old romance tends inevitably towards realism, especially in England, where the excessive imagination is curbed and the heroes become more human. In Malory, in the unknown author of Saint Gawain and the Green Knight, and especially in Chaucer, we find to see the effect of the practical English mind in giving these old romances a more natural setting, and in making the horses suggest heroes. And in making the heroes suggest, though friendly, the men and women of their own day. The Canterbury Tales, with their story, interest, and their characters delightfully true to nature, have in them the suggestion, at least, of a connected story whose chief aim is to reflect life as it is.